planning meeting of the Pine-Richland School Board. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Dr. Banyas?
Here.
Mr. DiTullio?
Here.
Mr. Sundo?
Here.
Mr. Kashani? Ms. Dawson? Here. Ms. Johnston?
Here.
Mr. Lyons? Mr. Stegman? Here. Ms. Goebel? Yes. Thank you.
Very brief president's statement today. There have been some new legal developments in the transgender privacy arena, and we will be having an update this evening from our council. Begin with our first recognition of visitors. Anybody wishing to approach the board? Correspondence. Oh, my bad. Sorry. Correspondence.
The following community members contacted the board regarding transgender youth privacy facilities and implications to the district. Remy and Cheryl Schoon, Beth Leonard, Mary Lynn Dugan, Thomas and Terry Bridge.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. My apologies. Now it is time, item 1.03, for our first recognition of visitors. Anybody wish to approach the board, please do so. Try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Give us your name and your address.
Am I good? Okay. Good evening. My name's Christina Avalone. I live in Gibsonia, 330 Ivy Drive. So I was recently away out of the country, and I got the breaking news. I happen to have Wi-Fi, which was kind of neat to get when you're out of the country, and it said U.S. Supreme Court halts access to restrooms based on gender identity in schools. The U.S. Supreme Court has stepped in and put a stop to schools allowing biological males into female private facilities and vice versa. I was so excited. And yet, when I got back to America, found out Pine-Richland is keeping status quo. That this doesn't mean we're making any changes. And that was disheartening, to be in a school district that I guess isn't allowing the Supreme Court of the United States of America to decide what we do. And if you're going to tell me something different, that would be great. But to hear that makes me think maybe I now need to sue the school. I think if enough people got wind that we were going to sue you as the board for the members that did not vote in favor of biological males and females, or those that chose not to vote because they have no courage. How is that? Is that what we want to do as a community? We want to have a lawsuit because the Supreme Court, once again, says breaking news. The Supreme Court has chosen biological males. This is temporary measure to protect, not to protect the 3 that we have in Pine-Richland that you have bathrooms for. You no longer, Mr. Sundo, have the ORC to fear. You have the United States government saying to protect the rights, privacy, and safety of the status quo until the court, not Pine-Richland, the court can hear this. So I'd like to just make an appeal to you as the school board to vote if that's the only way you have to do it, because the status quo since the 50s was boys going to boys, girls going to girls, and if you don't know where you are right now, you go into a unisex, I guess. And if you're a biological boy, you should go into a biological boys' bathroom or unisex as the Pine-Richland has created. And if you do not want to make that decision, have the courage to stand with the United States government, then I think we need a lawsuit to make that decision. Because you never voted before this to allow this to happen, why you're now needing to have a lawyer tell you what the United States Supreme Court has already said is amazing to me. So unless this board is going to take a stand, I think as a Pine-Richland parent, that matters to my daughter, that I may have to find a lawyer from the different lawsuits that are out there today to fight for my daughter's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Avalon.
Hi, my name is Scott Gagliardi. I'm from Meridian Road in Gibsonia. I'm sure by now all board members are fully aware of the lawsuit filed by multiple states, including Texas, to challenge the administration's stance on transgender use of opposite-sex restrooms, locker rooms, and showers. I'm also sure by now our solicitor has made the board aware of the recent brief filed by the Justice Department on July 27th, responding to this case. Just so the community is aware, I will read the pertinent information where the Justice Department clarifies its position, just as a formality and for public awareness. Guidance document, this is from the Justice Department stating their position on the case. Guidance documents issued by ED, which is Education Department, do not create or confer any rights for any person and do not impose any requirements beyond those required under applicable laws and regulations. There are some references then to the U.S. Department of Education guidance and some website addresses. The next sentence after that, and I put it in bold so I see it, the guidance documents at issue in this case are explicit about the fact they do not have the force of law. It specifically lists the section to look at, and it has it highlighted in parentheses. This guidance does not add requirements to applicable law, but provides information and examples to inform recipients about how departments evaluate whether covered entities are complying with their legal obligations. Similarly, the Holder memo, which was the second letter, there were two, I believe that might have been the first letter, but it was one of the two. The Holder memo merely clarifies the best reading of Title IX's prohibition of sex discrimination is that it encompasses discrimination based on gender identity, so including transgender status. It states explicitly that it is not intended to otherwise prescribe the course of litigation or defenses that should be raised in any particular employment or discrimination case. Okay. Now, I want to be crystal clear on this point. The Justice Department described the guidance documents, and I am in quote again, explicit about the fact they do not have the force of law. Yet we have sat here through repeated meetings and watched our solicitor clearly and unequivocally state to board members, multiple board members, that the Department of Education guidance did, in fact, carry the force of law. This is, of course, in direct contradiction to the conclusions of the Department of Justice's brief. Now, can any of the board members show us any example of a Pine-Richland solicitor directly contradicting the findings of the Department of Justice? We've heard that said before on a different subject by a particular board member, and I would ask that. Have we ever had that? The answer is obviously no. I would consider it only appropriate going forward that the solicitor recuse himself from providing advice on the board on this subject going forward, considering the magnitude of this misjudgment. I would also urge the board to solicit a second legal opinion going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gagliardi. Anybody else wish to approach the board?
Hi, my name is Renee, and I live at 5717 Summit Street in Gibsonia. And I want to make the board aware and the school aware of my son. He is just finished first grade, and he had extended school this year. And I was here the night that we voted for the new busing contract. And I believe we were told that the buses wouldn't be over 2 years old and that there would be the big buses and there would be short buses. I don't remember anything about the kids being put on a van. And there was a van that showed up to take my son to school for extended school for 3 weeks. And it was just a purple cargo passenger van that had been converted. He has balance issues. I had to physically lift him up and put him on the bus. He could not maneuver the steps. There wasn't an aide on the bus to help him. If I didn't buckle him in the seat, the bus driver did not get up and help him buckle himself. She asked another student to do that. This went on for 2 weeks, and the last week they showed up in a short bus. And I said, "Oh, we finally got a bus." And she said, "No, nobody knows where the keys are to the van." So he went Monday and Tuesday, and in the morning on Wednesday in a short bus. And then the van showed back up Wednesday afternoon, and I said, "Oh, I guess they found the keys." And she said, "Yeah, well, a master mechanic had this van." I said, "Oh, well, they couldn't have," joking with her, I said, "they couldn't have lost the keys for another day and a half." And she was like, "I told them the kids don't like this bus. They don't want this bus. They want the short bus." So then on Thursday, the last day, I wound up taking him in the morning, and his was the only one that was a van. There were short buses sitting there, and that really kind of bothered me because I'm like, why couldn't he have been put on a short bus? So I'm just wanting to make you guys aware of that to find out what the situation was and going forward, because every year he's going to have extended school. So if I need to take him, I will, because I can't have him on that type of a vehicle. I mean, he can't even walk down the halls at school without an aide. So to me, it was appalling to ask another student to buckle him into a seatbelt and, you know, to ask them to help him off the bus. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to approach the board? Thank you all for your comments. Item 1.04, minutes for approval. Recommended action, motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached.
Second.
The item is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Action items. Item 2.01, personnel, motion to approve the personnel items as attached.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.02, contracted psychologist, motion to approve the attached contracted psychological services agreements for 2016-2017 school year.
Second.
The item is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.03, Assistant Superintendent Performance Rating. Motion to approve the Assistant Superintendent's 2015-16 performance rating is listed.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Pasquinelli, for your good work. Item 2.04, elementary Chromebook carts. Motion to approve the purchase of 7 new Chromebook carts and 3 purpose carts for a total of 10 carts in the amount of $104,506.93.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Replacement of cafeteria tables. Motion to approve replacement of cafeteria tables for Richland Elementary from PEM Company through CoStar's program as attached.
Second.
The item is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.06, second reading of policy 822, automated external defibrillator cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Motion to approve as a second reading policy 822 as attached.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
The final paragraph still lists or limits, or certainly could be interpreted and limited
Any further comments?
I just want to confess that I really didn't have time to spend looking at this additionally, but I will before the next reading. So,
She wrote the AR as well.
yeah. Is it, it's here, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean, I looked at it, but not in enough detail.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the second reading say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.07, second reading of policy 806, child abuse. Motion to approve as a second reading, policy 806 as attached.
Second.
The item has moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.08, band and cheerleading trip to Ohio. Recommended action, motion to approve the student attendance and application of the student discipline code for the Pine-Richland High School band and cheerleaders to travel to Lakewood, Ohio to support the varsity football team in their game against St. Edward High School from 8 a.m. August 27, 2016 to 6 p.m. August 27, 2016, as described on the attached field trip request form.
Second.
The item has moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.09, PSBA conference trip. Barbara Williams, motion to approve the attendance of Barbara Williams, Board Secretary at the 2016 PASA PSBA School Board Secretaries Conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania, from Thursday, October 13th through Saturday, October 15th, 2016.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.10, motion to approve Therese Dawson and Peter Lyons as the voting delegates for the 2016 PSBA Legislative Policy Council meeting held in October.
Second.
The item has moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
There isn't any discussion about the particular, I just wanted to say, I was at the committee meeting last Saturday where they decide what gets sent to the platform, and I meant to bring those things as updates today, but I'll bring it to the next meeting, just so you know what went on at that meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.01, strategic plan, key initiatives for 2016-17. I will pass this off to
me.
you.
Okay,
Dr.
thank you,
Miller.
Dr. Banyas. At our board senior leadership team retreat this summer, these were 6 concepts, 6 action plans or ideas that were lifted out as being what we felt was most critical as we go into the 2016-17 school year. We included them here in this way so those who, again, are looking at the agenda, reading about it, can see more detail. My internet is not currently active, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of the components. For instructional strategies, this is a natural next step from the focus on what is being taught curriculum to how it's being taught and how we build again, effective learning within the classroom. And Dr. Pasquinelli will go into a little bit more detail later in tonight's agenda on that topic. The second deals with an in-depth program review. I'll use a specific example that has come up in discussion. In the curriculum process, we looked at what was taught within our current structure. This idea of an in-depth program review asks additional questions about, are we using the right structure? For example, do we need more time in grade 6 at Eden Hall in science? Should the transition in structure of grade 6 sequence differently with what happens in grade 7? And other questions that are broader than just curriculum, but also about the program. So again, you'll be hearing more about this, but this is a big idea to go into greater depth. In terms of technology, the board is well aware of the investment in infrastructure over the past couple of years, and with that investment shifts our focus to the use of that technology to support learning. And so this key initiative is in that area. The next deals with Universal Screener. Now, for us, Ames Web is a tool that's used primarily in the elementary grades as this form of assessment. And so this particular topic will be really examining, why do we give that assessment? What are the benefits? What are the pros and cons of that assessment? What do we do with the information? How does it inform decision-making? Are there other tools or instruments out there that should be considered? So again, I think very important for us, given the amount of time that we spend in that area. We've had recent discussions on the shift from 5 to 10-year capital funding and how that fits into a budget concept for long range. So that's the fifth one. And the final one is really an umbrella around performance and continuous improvement. So some of the examples of things are how we provide feedback within our organization for continuous growth. All employees, all of us have strengths and we have opportunities for improvement. How do we work with that so that we can all get just a little bit better and a little bit better? The second component deals with new hire orientation. The third with induction of new teaching hires that come to us. And then the last part are some tools that help us facilitate that process. So again, you heard about this in the retreat, but in a nutshell, this is an opportunity for the community to hear more or to go on and read a little bit about these. And these will be very deeply connected to the things that we're talking about in committees and at other times in the next 12 months. Again, Dr. Pasquinelli will touch upon one a little bit later, but are there any general questions or comments?
The first initiative of the, is that an administrative activity or the academic services committee be involved as well?
The instructional strategies has been something that has been discussed at different times, but that one is the one that Dr. P is going to go into a little more detail in a few minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Finance, Mr. Sundo.
Item 4.01, we'll be approving the June and July unaudited financial reports along with accounts payable and paid accounts through August 22nd. Item 4.02 is budget transfers. There will not be any per Pennsylvania School Code. We cannot have any budget transfers until October 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Sundo. Academic achievement, Ms. Dawson.
Item 5.01, professional development calendar. If anyone would like to.
Dr. P will take the next two, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Sure.
Just a couple of slides I wanted to share. Wanted to show you and share with you just to give you a little bit of the inside of the thinking that goes into developing professional development opportunities for our staff over the course of a school year. It really starts the previous school year, so we got together around late May 25th, with our professional development committee. That is comprised of central office, building level administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, custodians, community members, business organizations. And the concept there is to bring groups together and talk about strategically where we're going with the school district and then other needs that we have for professional growth for our staff. So that leads us into a conversation about what's good professional development look like. And the ones that you see that are X'd on this slide are things that we really stressed the importance of implementation. That one where you have at the bottom, locally grown, if possible, that concept is best practice is if we have our professionals presenting, facilitating, supporting, and then when we go back into the classroom, there's that ongoing relationship and support that happens through that level of professional development. That's ultimately what we're looking for. So it's a little bit of a brainstorming session about what do we want out of these opportunities. We only get 5.5 a year. It's not a ton of time, so we really have to take advantage of the time that we have with our staff. So we talked about this, and this slide will pop up quite a bit. You'll see this in a lot of the presentations, even the one I'm going to talk about later with instructional strategies, and the concepts about jumping the gap, which is It's good to know new things, but the impact on kids is when you implement change and you start to see things happening. So those conversations that we have with our staff is now we're going to implement, we're going to measure progress, and we're going to see the impact that it has ultimately in classrooms and outside classrooms. This is just, again, what are all the things that we need to work on? And you can see it's quite an extensive list, and then it has some coding of who are the people that need to receive this type of professional development. And just like students, it's different for different people, different groups. So we talk about we have to differentiate our professional development for staff, just as we expect our teachers to differentiate instruction for our students. Well, how do we do that? We talk about morning meetings at some schools. We talk about faculty meetings, grade level meetings, department meetings, and voluntary opportunities for teachers to come after school or before school for additional professional development. We have to do all those things to hit on all of these needs. Some of them obviously are in much more detail when we're talking strategically, but some of them are items that we just need to learn and develop as we move forward. And we've even started some online learning opportunities for our staff with quick podcasts that if I'm standing in a grocery store line, I can listen to a video for 5 minutes and at least get some level of understanding that will maybe elicit some questions and development from there. And then that takes us to, this is a draft, but this is what we use to guide our plans for this entire school year. So it goes all the way from our first in service on August 22nd to our last in service on June 2nd of 2017. Again, we may tweak it as the school year goes on, but it goes from that committee to what we need to implementation of the professional development sessions. We just wanted to share that overview with you so you get an idea how the planning takes place and then ultimately the implementation of the professional development. Any questions
Thank
on
you.
that? Did you have a question, Dr. Banish?
No, I said
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. The second item here under academic achievement is instructional strategies. Rachel, would you mind pulling that one up for me? And again, I'm not going to take you through this entire presentation, but again, we're really excited about this because we're working with our principals right now. They will be presenting this to all staff members on August 22nd, which is our first day back in the afternoon. And it will happen at the building level. And the concept here, as Brian mentioned, is we worked on curriculum. If you remember, I'm going to jump to this slide because this is an important concept. You've seen this before, and it's about all three of those aspects working well. You know, we talked about, you know, we're as strong as our weakest link. If our curriculum's, okay, well then you have to listen to me, so that's a real benefit for that one. If we're weak in one of those areas, then in terms of the experience in the classroom, that's where it starts to break down. We spent significant time working on curriculum, and now the instruction and the assessments have to come along as well. So the concept behind this presentation is identifying those instructional strategies that are research-based most effective. There is no cookie-cutter way for instruction to work for all kids, but there's a lot of research out there that guides us to say, if you do this well, you're more likely to have a greater impact on student learning. The other side of it is we're trying to build some common understanding and language within our district. So as your students progress K to 12, and their teachers in grade 1, they're talking about learning goals and learning activities, and they hear those same phrases in Eden Hall, and then when they get to the middle school and the high school, the concepts that we're trying to embed in those learning opportunities, that consistency goes a long way for students to really understand. So this is a big piece of where we're going to strengthen all three of those. And we want our staff to understand all of those components that go with it. So this will be an ongoing conversation that will happen throughout the school year. Another slide I just wanted, that one I talked about, it's an ongoing theme of implementation, measuring progress. What's it going to look like now in a classroom after we learn some of these things in professional development? another key theme. You know, just like any organization, we have our strengths and our needs. And our teacher, with a range of teachers and staff members, we have those that are very high performing, those that are perhaps struggling a bit, and quite a bit in the middle. What we're talking about is everyone taking a step to the right. Obviously, we want people to move as far as possible, but if this entire organization moves a step to the right, 500 plus people making positive progress, the impact on kids is significant. So that's another key theme that we'll share. This is kind of the theme or model. The Danielson Educator Effectiveness is nothing new. It's what we've been using for our observation tool for the last couple of years. So the language embedded in that model is already something we talk about with our staff all the time. We just want to focus in on some of those most effective strategies within that model and others that we can drive our professional development. So we've selected really, and I'm going to go to the last slide, a couple of strategies to focus in on. One, the third bullet down, is to really understand the difference between learning goals and learning activities. And I'll take you to a quick visual. I think it helps to see that picture in the bottom right. To get from point A to point B, that's the goal. How we get students to point B is up to the individual teacher. There may be different learning activities that are different even within one classroom. So the path we take to get to the learning goal may be different, but ultimately every third grade student has the same learning goal. It's just a difference on how we take them and how we get to that point. So understanding that and then sharing that with students in terminology that is understandable and clear for them is a key part of the work that we're going to do this first part of the school year. And then the second, or the last two bullet points are about classroom routines and procedures and developing relationships with kids. You know, you think, you know, those are no-brainers. You have to develop routines in classrooms. You have to develop relationships with students to be successful. But there are some effective best practices that we want our staff to share with one another and really get good across the board, regardless of what classroom that you go to. You're seeing staff working toward those type of goals. And then I just want to point one last thing. The last bullet under each, last sub-bullet under each one of those main bullet points is about how can we measure this. So again, think about that jump from knowing to doing, that jumping the gap that I talked about. For example, in establishing relationships, well, how can you measure that? Well, you can see when you go into a classroom, does this teacher know every child by name? Is this teacher using what he or she learned about that student's or the group of students' interest to drive those instructional strategies? I know a group of kids that get really fired up about music, so how can I integrate that into the learning opportunities that'll get those kids excited about math too? And then things, again, like classroom procedures, learning goals and learning activities, how can we measure that? We can see that in lesson plan development. When I sit next to a student in the classroom, I can say, hey, Johnny, what are you learning today and why? And if Johnny can tell me that, that's a good thing, and I give the teacher some positive feedback on that. If Johnny's really not clear, then we've got to talk about that and make sure that information's clear. So this is where we're driving right now in the beginning of the school year for all of our staff to participate, implement, and then again, that homegrown, so now we can share best practices with each other and constantly get better and improve. So that's kind of a quick overview of where we're going with instructional strategies.
I just have a quick comment about the little illustration you used. I find it interesting that the illustration has not one example of a straight line. Everything's a wavy, long road to the goal.
That's a great point.
I'm just, and the reason that struck me is because that's frustrating to kids sometimes, or most often.
Mm-hmm.
If they feel like they're on that road going like up and down and up and around and all that stuff, that's concerning.
Okay, and again, just so you know, my point was there's different paths to get to that
No,
endpoint.
I get it.
And I hear what you're saying, that one of the paths should be direct.
Well, I think all the paths for each child should be that straight line. So strategy is great, But sometimes I think we get lost in not focusing in on the goal because we're too busy worrying about the path. And that's, again, it's just my comment, and we're at no lack for strategy. But let's zero in on the goal.
Okay, thank you.
Doctor, is there anything at risk in this initiative due to the collective bargaining agreement? Any aspect that we can't do or would be ill-advised to pursue due to the collective bargaining agreement?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Unless you have a specific example that we'd be able to draw upon.
The bell curve just struck me as it's akin to measurement and evaluation. Specifically, I would assume teacher evaluation. So it's all good?
Within the collective bargaining agreement with the professional employees, obviously the district has a certain and set and to some degree limited number of days in which we can implement, number one, from the professional development side. But as far as the curriculum instruction, learning goals, and pushing it into the classroom, there's nothing contractually that would prohibit us in any way from implementing what we have here.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. In fact, it builds together, so it's not in isolation. They're all connected.
Good.
Yeah, and another key point of that is that those that are delivering are not just, I mentioned building principals, but part of that team that's presenting, we have classroom teachers that are part of that team as well. And that is the concept, is building teacher leaders as part of it. So it's a collaborative effort in putting this together.
Great, thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? Thank you, Dr. Miller, Dr. Pasquinelli, Ms. Dawson. Buildings and grounds, Mr. DiTullio.
Item 6.01 is information on an update of the summer projects. Dana, you?
Well, I'm gonna have to open it. Love it. Sorry, can't read it from my end. Where we are on each of these, we are on pace with all of them. We did try and include as much detail as we could for each one. As we go down through, quite a few of them have been completed, some of them have just been scheduled. The one that is still pending again is the expansion of the parking lot area at Eden Hall. A lot of that has been kind of set to the back burner while we've been working on the entrance area off of Ridge Road. As we move on down through, as we work through the networking project at the middle school, then we will address the security camera system. We've looked into a few options, but at this point, we're still looking at what those would be and then try and come up with something that would basically cover the entire district at some point where we can pull all of that together. I do believe, as I'm looking at these, quite a few of the other ones where they have been just purchases, we have submitted those purchase orders and some of those are still yet to be delivered. Does anyone have any questions on any specific?
Yeah, we're on track.
All right, item 6.02, another informational item, and it's a review of the joint buildings and grounds finance committee meeting, and the focus of those meetings, or that meeting, I should say, was the athletic field study, and kind of a master plan of that study. I don't know who's going to speak to that in detail, being the board member who was, one of the board members who was involved in this and also attended the meeting. The thing that was striking to me, that as all the board members get a chance to review this, is when you look at the growth of the district, and in particular the growth of the number of teams that are using our athletic fields, and the fact that our athletic footprint of fields has not grown, we're really stretched to the limit. So this is one of those things that to continue to offer the same kind of services that we're doing in the best and the safest manner possible for the students, I think that this is really going to be something that we need to incorporate hard when we're looking at the capital expenditures of the upcoming years and how we're going to distribute monies.
We were not going to go through that in detail tonight. We reattached it just so it was in another place, not just in the committee meeting. But I would encourage any board member who was not able to be there, we'd be happy to walk you through the information. We did have a nice audience that night of community members, which was positive. But most important for us, we see the demographic study and the athletic facilities study as being two good inputs to the overall shift to a 10-year capital funding concept and how that connects to long-range budget strategy. So the end result of that work, I agree with Mr. DiTullio, was very positive, but it was not an ending so much as it gave us the information to have more discussion as we go through the next few months. In fact, later in the agenda, you'll see we're requesting another brief joint meeting in order to look at this information, but more importantly, to focus on the capital funding plan structure. So we're asking for that on August 22nd, if that works, in order to make sure we don't lose some of the momentum. As we mentioned earlier, this is one of what we believe are 6 key activities this year.
Any further questions on buildings and grounds? Thank you, Mr. Tullio, Dana, Dr. Miller. Student Services, Ms. Johnston.
Item 7.01 is going to be for board Item 7.2 is going to be for board consideration, and I'm going to make a motion to approve the attached contract at a cost of
The motion to approve the attached contract with the Midwestern Intermediate Unit at a cost of $1,391 for the 2016-17 school year.
Any discussion on student services? Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Staff Services, Ms. Goebel.
Item 8.01, personnel items. There'll be a motion made for us to approve a list of personnel items, and that'll be available for our next meeting.
Just a quick comment. We are very close in terms of the number of positions. So with the approvals tonight, we have filled almost all of the positions. There were some resignations noted, and so obviously we're working through that right now.
Thank you. In 8.02, there'll be a motion to approve the contract for services with the PAeducator.net for the next upcoming school year, 2016-2017, and that'll be available for our next meeting. Item 8.03, there'll be a motion to approve an increase in the amount of 30 cents per hour for cafeteria monitors beginning this coming school year, 2016-17. 8.04, there'll be a motion to approve the third and final reading of Policy 824, maintaining professional adult and student boundaries. 8.05 will be a motion to approve the first reading of Policy 226. And that's it.
Just a quick comment regarding 8.04. Mr. Kenny did update, based on some of the dialogue that has occurred here, the administrative regulation for that policy. So I just wanted to make sure if there were any other questions or if those changes looked good and were clear to the board, we would appreciate that feedback. But he's also ready to take any suggestions if people have them.
Okay. Any further discussion on staff services? Thank you, Ms. Goebel. Operational services, Mr. Stegman, would you mind taking this?
That's all. I don't have my glasses though, so wish me luck. For board consideration at the regular August meeting, motion to approve a proposal from Kristen Van Stride, thank you, for E-rate consulting services at a cost of $4,000. This is a renewal of a consultant agreement for the processing of the E-rate documentation in coordination with the discounted vendors. The services and pricing will continue to be held at $4,000 for the 7th year. Anybody want to explain what that is?
She does a great job for the district at a good fee, Mr. Stovener.
She handles the application process for all of the E-rate, Category 1 and Category 2, which applies for the network connectivity, internet connectivity, and also the bidding process that we have to follow for all the networking purchases. And coming up for next year, she'll be instrumental in the RWAN rebid as well. So we have to follow the guidelines so that we adhere to the E-rate rules and regulations. So she's kind of our guide for that.
Very good. Thank you. 9.02. For consideration at the next meeting, motion to approve replacement of the serving unit at Pine-Richland Middle School from Kerr and Taylor through CoStar's program is attached. Funding for this equipment will come from Fund 51 Food Service. In May of 2016, the 4-unit well stopped working. Then what happened? After service by the repair vendor, the vendor recommended replacement of the unit. Ms. Buckman requested multiple price quotes for the equipment and asked for a cold unit to be included in the price quote. This sounds very serious. The food service department.
Cover, obviously the survey is through the end of the year, but it was a temporary solution. So unfortunately, we would not be able to continue that temporary solution that we did use to close out the year.
What is it?
It's actually kind of like the hot wells where it holds the food. Diane would probably be better to explain it, but it.
Oh, on the serving line.
Serving unit, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We had to actually boil water to keep it hot. So it's
Old school at school, huh?
Year,
Very good. Any questions? 9.04? 3. For board consideration at the next meeting, motion to approve the PRA pool facilities agreement as attached for the 2016-2017 school year. This agreement is an annual renewal between Pine-Richland Aquatics and the Pine-Richland School District.
The only thing there is that we're waiting, and there will be some additional discussion. The PRA has requested a meeting with myself, Dr. Pasquinelli, and Mr. Shoup to discuss the new facilities use policy and the rates charged to PRA for that facility. So that meeting will occur within the next week, and hopefully we'll have agreement on that agreement on the contract to bring back for the 22nd.
Okay. Any other questions? 9.05, or no, 9.04? For board consideration at the next meeting, motion to approve the attached service agreement for extreme networking equipment for the 2016-2017 school year at a cost of $39,219. So,
Mr. Stovener might be able to just describe that briefly.
great.
This is a updated licensing agreement which covers next business day replacement of all of the district's networking equipment. It also includes any firmware or service agreement for the Wi-Fi controllers, very thing that was giving us problems here tonight. And so this was previously covered under the agreement with VARTech and had lapsed last year. Because we had so many different aspects of the networking gear being changed out and moving forward, this is a complete list of everything that has been replaced and full coverage on that for the next business day.
Very good. Any other questions? 9.05, transportation update.
I'll take that if that's all right. Just
Please.
To kick it off. Over the past year, we have been meeting really bi-weekly to focus on several areas of transportation, and the most significant of which was really looking at the overall routes. So we have several members of our STA team here, and Ms. Charney, our Transportation and Facility Use Coordinator as well. Dr. Pasquinelli is just going to talk about a couple slides as an example. We have this here for our community. Those who are interested can see this, but a lot of great work over the course of the year to really look at how we are transporting students.
Thanks, Dr. Miller. So as Dr. Miller mentioned, we worked quite a bit with the STA team over probably at least half the school year, a number of items. This presentation is really focusing on improvements in the routes and the efficiencies of those improvements, and hopefully you'll see that with some of the slides. Again, I'm not going to show you every school, but at least show you one school as an example. Just so everybody knows, Colleen McAndrews here, she's the manager of STA, and Andy Hartman's here, he's the assistant manager. Kim Charney's here as well from Pine-Richland. They were nice enough to come out. And again, we just want to publicly thank them for the teamwork. You know, it's been an ongoing effort in developing this with senior leadership and building level administrators and community, and talking about what some of those key aspects that we want to do to improve our experience for kids in terms of transportation. So one of the key parts to this is the criteria, and what we did throughout the process is say focus number one on safety. Safety from home to bus stop, safety at the bus stop, and safety from the bus stop to school and from school back home. Really looked at those closely, and over the course of really last year, we've developed some additional steps that we follow. If a parent calls and says, hey, I have a real concern about my child's bus stop, we have a team through STA, Northern Regional Police Department, and even local township support to take a close look at their concerns and then make a recommendation for change or status quo. So that was definitely the lead in terms of any of the decision making that went into this project, was safety number one. From there, we looked at route efficiency, and we noticed last year we had some that were rather efficient to get students home, some it was rather time consuming to get students home or to school, and how could we improve that. The other thing, if you recall last year, we talked about our student ridership, number of kids on a bus. Some school buses would pull away with 15, 20, 25, and some would be very crowded. So we wanted to look at that as well. So with that, we set some criteria, and these charts are important. I'll walk you through. The top is walk to stop. There's state maximums, so regulations from the state. The maximum for K to 6 is 1.5 miles. The maximum for 7 to 12 is 2.0 miles. We set our criteria here at Pine-Richland for K to 6 kids to be around 0.2 miles and 0.5 mile for 7 to 12. Once we went through this process and built the efficiencies, you can see our averages. For our K to 6 students, we average about 0.03 miles, and that's walk from home to bus stop. And we put a quick graphic to give you an idea. On average, that's about 1/2 a football field to get from home to your bus stop. Maybe some people with a little bit more of a walk, maybe some people with less, but that's the general idea for K to 6. And then 7-12, it's 0.08 miles, which is about 425 feet. Again, could be a couple plus, could be a couple minus. In terms of student loading, just an understanding of the thinking that goes into how many students can you place on a bus. And there's the key down there that if you think of a bench or a seat, we could, in K to or elementary, K to 3, technically we could have 3 children per seat. And again, you'll see the majority of cases that does not happen. When you get to Eden Hall, that ratio changes because the students start to get bigger, they have more materials, instruments and things like that. So it's 2 plus per seat. And again, what that basically says is the majority of seats will be 2 to a seat on a bus. There may be some seats that are 3 to a seat. And then typically what we do is we would load our younger students, our 4th graders, because they're still smaller and have more opportunity to go 3 to a seat, and leave the 2 to the seat for our older and bigger kids. But and then high school, it goes to maximum of 2 per seat, because now we're talking about the bigger kids in the school district. So that concept's important about how we started in terms of building this out.
Doctor, can you just provide a little bit of background as to how the guidelines were derived?
This is
The PRSD guidelines?
Yeah, the state was really a starting point, and then we had some conversation about where we are now, in terms of best practices and ideal practices for Pine-Richland School District. So we looked at some of the data that's existing from the 15-16 school year to say we're right where we want to be, or we want to drop that off a little bit. So it was really taking 15-16 data was our starting point.
Thank you.
On those, our Pine-Richland guidelines, I know you said the averages are, do any walks exceed our guidelines, our 0.2 and 0.5 miles?
The only ones that came up, and there might be a couple, but they are because of extremely long driveways, and that's really not a part of the calculation.
Right.
So
Okay.
when it comes to, if that's accurate, when it comes to actually walking from the edge of the road to
Yeah.
their stop, it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Is that
Yep,
correct?
that's-
Correct.
Yeah.
This slide is just a reminder that part of our responsibility is also to transport private and parochial students, and the concept of working with any school within a 10-mile radius of our boundaries is our responsibility. And there's real challenges around that because, again, students are sporadically living in different parts of our community, and then to work a system that's as efficient as possible means you need transfer stops and other logistical challenges. Last year was a kind of a late start because getting information from our private schools and really understanding the transfer points, we were behind the 8 ball. This year we're feeling much better, and partially was due to this action plan process of intentionally working closely with our partner schools. We have already had 2 face-to-face meetings with them, so there's clear understanding of what information we need so we can build out these routes and get them out to the families as quickly as possible. We're anticipating tomorrow that the information for private and parochial schools, transportation route, meaning bus stop and location and time to and from school, will be mailed out tomorrow. So they should be receiving that information later this week, which is an outstanding improvement. And then our students here at Pine-Richland would be receiving their information when home access opens, which is on August 15th. And that's good. I mean, that we're in a much, much better place. And that's through a lot of this communication that has occurred between Pine-Richland and all of these school districts, which is, again, a real positive. So here's an example of what we're talking about with some of the change. I'll just kind of walk you through. The blue line, and this is Richland Elementary AM route. So if you focus on the blue line, you're looking at where we were during the 15-16 school year. The left-hand side are route times. The right-hand side are student counts, number of students on each of the buses. We have the bus numbers along the bottom. The first attempt at improving this, we looked at both route times and student counts equally. Again, safety first, and then route times and student counts. Now focus on the red line, and you can see there was some improvement, especially in student counts. We went from the blue, which was rather inconsistent, to the red line in student counts, which was almost not a straight line, but much improved. With doing that, we didn't have the level of impact on our route times that we were hoping for. You still see the red line under route times is still somewhat inconsistent. Times are higher, times are lower. So at that point, we decided to shift. Priority number 1 is still safety. Priority number 2 became route times over student ridership. So now you see with the green line that student counts is a little more inconsistent than it was initially, but we have a closer flat line with route times. And that's what we prioritize, believing, hearing from our community, that's what we were striving for. So we have a range of 20 to 34 in terms of minutes on bus in the AM for students at Richland Elementary, where in the past we had a range of 20, I'm looking at the blue, 24 to 43. So that efficiency was achieved through the work that was accomplished over the course of the last 6 months. I'll pause there on this slide. Any comments or questions?
Do you mind going to the next, keep one more? Just to continue with this, because I mean, it wasn't just a matter of looking at each route, it's a matter of shifting students across those buses in order to improve those. So you want to talk to that just for a minute?
Yeah, what we were hoping you could see, it's a little challenging, but on the left-hand side, you see the different colors. Each color represents a bus route. And in the red box on the left-hand side, you see quite a bit of overlap of color, which means you have buses that are crossing paths. You may have multiple buses showing up in the same neighborhood, and really trying to understand why, if that was even necessary. So again, through the work that was accomplished over the last 6+ months, on the right-hand side, you see more of that distinction between colors. You have a route that has this certain area to take care of, a route, so not as much overlap, more efficiency, and then the end result comes back to student time on bus. Okay, to accomplish that, that is, like Brian said, moving students perhaps from one route to a different, changing the communities from this community now is served by this bus versus this. Really looking at bus stops to make sure we were efficient with bus stops. We had a number of places where over time we had added and added and added bus stops for a variety of reasons, but we never looked at that to say we can pull those back and still follow our set criteria for walk to stop. So we met that, and with that we built quite a bit of efficiency through this process. So if you take a deep look at this presentation, you'll also see, of course, Hanson, Wexford, you'll see Eden Hall, and you'll see the high school, and you can see where we were last year and what we're proposing for this year. What the drivers are doing right now is if there was any change in route, then they are driving it to give feedback back to the managers at STA to say, hey, this, you can't do this, or consider this. So we are still tweaking some of those changed routes in preparation for the students. And again, August 15th is the day that we will open up home access for schedules and for transportation information.
Any further questions on transportation or operational services? Thank you, Dr. Pasquinelli. Thank you, Mr. Stegman. Board business, 10.01 PSBA officers election. I'm going to defer this one to Ms. Dawson for any background on the officer elections.
Yeah, so, thank you. So, as I mentioned, I was just out in the, in Harrisburg, or Mechanicsburg, technically, on last Saturday of July. And so PSBA, I'm just going to be real straightforward and real. As you can see, the names, it's very few names because it's just the same people. And so around this large table of committee members from around the state is the same people that are always sitting there. I haven't been up there for a couple of years just because I haven't been, but there is need for more people of different ideas to get involved. So I guess my editorial comment is that these are all people that have been involved for the past several years. They all have similar ideas, and there's not a lot of new ideas. So I will bring my information the next time to give you. Actually, I can scan it and have Barb email it, and then we can discuss it, just so you know what kind of went on. But as far as I know some about these people, but very little. But they've been in these offices for some time. So that's my insight. It's kind of like shooting at the name that's already there, if you know what I'm saying. So that's it. That's all I have to say for now.
Did you say at the last meetings that they now have these meetings on the weekends, or was this held during the week?
No, that was a weekend.
Okay.
But I guess what I found is there's a heavy involvement of districts that are not like ours. You know, there's not, it's a lot of urban districts or struggling districts, and those are the people that are mostly involved. And we are not represented well in what our district needs are. And you could tell your friends, Pat, that I said that. One of his friends was there and, did the old, in my opinion thing, which doesn't sit well for me. Okay, that's it.
Do you have recommendation to read the
No, I would have to say, for the voting meeting, I will. I can send it out in email through Barb. That's, I guess, what I meant.
When is it due?
When is it due, Barb?
It's not due. It says the open voting period is August 15th, October 3rd, so we don't have to vote tonight.
Yeah, we don't have to do it.
Okay. Fair enough. And I would amend that motion to say that we defer the vote at this time. Anybody disagree or?
It's only an
just
informational item.
information.
Information?
It's not up for vote.
Oh, because it says, that's,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha, all right. All right, item 10.02, I'm going to ask Mr. Clare to give us some background, professional background on what transpired over the past 10 days or week or so with regard to the Supreme Court and the Texas case.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Branius. The pace of legal things is usually like pushing mud uphill with a rope, but what's happened over the last several months on this topic has been relatively speedy. Just to go over a couple of points on the calendar, it was in mid to late April that the Fourth Circuit issued its decision saying that the district court should have been more deferential to OCR's position when it analyzed the GG case. It issued its decision on April 19th. On May the 31st, that court declined to grant rehearing, meaning it was a panel decision 2-1. An application was made to have the case reheard by the entire Fourth Circuit. That request was declined. Another request was made to that court to have the effect of its decision stayed pending further review. The Fourth Circuit declined that request on June the 9th. On June 17th, the Fourth Circuit issued what is called its mandate, which is a little technical thing for lawyers, has to do with a precise docketing date. But I mention it because that's what triggers the window in which a party can ask the Supreme Court for review. It's the issuance of the mandate, which was here mid-June, not mid-April. On June the 23rd, the district court in the GG case entered an order telling the Gloucester School District that pursuant to the Fourth Circuit's order, it would have to allow student GG to use the designated boys' rooms in the Gloucester schools. In doing so, what the court did was it issued an injunction against implementation of the resolution which had been adopted by the Gloucester schools in December of 2014. Okay. On July the 13th, the school district filed an application with the Supreme Court for a stay of the mandate of the Fourth Circuit and of the injunction which was issued on the 23rd by the district court. The court, there's some intervening filings there. The court asked for responses from different participants. And on August 3rd, as everyone who follows this at all would be aware, the Supreme Court entered an order staying the effects of the Fourth Circuit's decision and the injunction which was issued by the district court in late June. So, as I said, the petition for a writ to be allowed, maybe I should say this first. When you go have a case in the Common Pleas Court in Allegheny County and you don't like it, you automatically have a right to appeal to, say, the Superior Court or the Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania. If you don't like what happens at a magistrate, you have an automatic right to go to the Common Pleas Court. When a decision is made in the circuit courts of appeal in the federal system, you do not have an absolute right to have that case heard by the Supreme Court of the United States. You have to file a document asking for permission to do so. It's technically called a petition for a writ of certiorari. Now, that petition has to be filed within, as I said, 90 days of this mandate. The deadline for filing that is probably late August or early September. I didn't actually count the days from June, whenever. The application that was presented to the Supreme Court was not an application for a stay pending the outcome of an appeal. It was for a stay pending the Supreme Court's decision on whether it will even grant an appeal. So it was a very preliminary type of stay. The Supreme Court did grant that, and in its order it said when the application for an appeal is filed, if that application is declined by the Supreme Court, this stay will evaporate, which would reinvigorate the Fourth Circuit's decision. It's important to understand that a stay is not a reversal of the underlying decision. Notwithstanding what headlines will say or the way the television will talk about it or the way newspapers or reporters in this sort of thing, a stay is not a reversal. It simply says, it's like putting a phone call on hold. It's not hanging up on the call. It's putting it on hold. So that's where this stands right now. Now, the question down in Gloucester about whether GG can or cannot use the boys' rooms, the Supreme Court hasn't said GG can't. What the Supreme Court has said is the federal courts are not requiring it. Now, presumptively, I don't imagine that Gloucester School District is going to reverse course, and so its prohibition of GG using the boys' room is what will stay in place for the time being. But right now, the federal courts have themselves not said GG cannot use the boys' room. The federal courts have said there's an order saying he can, but for the time being, put it on hold. All right. So that's the status of that. If the Supreme Court grants an appeal, if it issues this writ of certiorari, and that's the process that puts a whole lot of things in motion. First, I should say, when a petition is filed, everybody that's a participant gets to join in, oppose. They have a lot of filings, and that would all happen. Presumably, if they file the petition late August, early September, all those other filings will happen in 30 to 60 days. I would not anticipate a decision from the Supreme Court whether to grant an appeal or not until at least October. The court's in recess right now. Supreme Court business year starts the first Monday of October, and that's when things get rolling down there. If the court declines to grant the writ, it just reverses everything. Reverse is a bad word, talking about legal decisions. It reinstates the Fourth Circuit decision. It reinstates the district court's injunction against Gloucester School District. If the court allows an appeal to go forward, that means it grants the petition for the writ of certiorari. It issues the writ, meaning the appeal is going to go forward. This stay will remain in place until the court rules on the merits of that case. So that's where the matter sits right now. So it's very important. The small takeaway is what the Supreme Court did not reverse the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. It pressed the hold button to leave things, and it said to leave things as they were at the time that the Fourth Circuit issued its decision. At the time that the Fourth Circuit issued its decision on April 19th, GG was not being permitted to use the boys' rooms because when GG had asked in that lawsuit in Virginia for an injunction to allow him to do so, the district court in GG had said no. So the status quo was the prohibition, which the district court would not intervene in. The Fourth Circuit reversed, but the Supreme Court has said for the time being, we're going to put that on hold. So more news later, I suppose you would say. I did want to address something, Mr. Gegler. This is not to be personal. When I saw you leave, I was disappointed because I wanted to address something. I thought I need to address this on the record for a couple reasons. These things are very complex and nuanced. And the first thing I want understood is this school board has always understood what does and does not have the, quote, force of law, whether it be a black letter statute in the federal or state system, whether it be a controlling decision issued by a state or federal court applicable to Pennsylvania. And the board has always been aware that OCR's pronouncements in its guidance letters are interpretive and they are not dispositive. They are things about which people can fight. I think that's always been clear. The discussion has also ranged in the debate back and forth among people. Well, don't we usually do what OCR says? Yes, most of what OCR says is very detailed, small, it's at a granular level that doesn't have big social implications. When OCR says, here's the way we want you to do this, or here's the way we want you to do that, it's just something that gets worked out. This is obviously a much bigger issue than, what size tires you put on a bus or something like that. But, so I want everybody to understand that the school board understands the legal landscape of this. And I'm saying that. I believe that the school board has, as I've made every effort to ensure that the board does, both in the comments I've made here, the discussions we've had in our private executive sessions, and those that have been in our private correspondence. Second is that I have no recall, and I would not have pronounced anywhere that the OCR guidances have the force of law. They simply don't. They never have. There's no reason to have said that. There's been a lot of debate about whether this district, any district, should defer, should they fight, should they put up with, should they concede. And we've also had discussions about this doctrine of deference that the courts wrestle with in terms of should the courts, when they interpret statutes, should the courts defer to what any department says through its guidances. We've had that kind of discussion, but if somehow the impression was left or taken by implication or this way or inference on the other side that they have the force of law, that's a misunderstanding, and I don't believe anybody on the board ever believed that as well. In fact, if you would recall, one of the questions after OCR's pronouncement in late May, I think it was in late May, one of their more recent guidance letters, when people were talking about, well, what does this mean? Do we have to do this? Do you not have to do this? And we go through the litigation scenarios, the who sues who, and back and forth. And after a discussion where I recall saying, yeah, look, it's not the force of law, but it's where they are. And Mr. Stegman asked me, well, in any event, what's your opinion of the OCR letter? And perhaps I was too lawyerly, but what my answer was that the OCR letter sets forth in a clear and articulate way the arguments that support OCR's conclusion. OCR believes and has announced that it believes that the law already entitles transgender individuals to use restrooms on the basis of identity. They've made that eminently clear. Their letters have set forth the arguments why it takes that position, and their letters have done that in a very articulate, and good expositional way. Whether they will be persuasive to a court is a completely different thing. There are, of course, arguments advanced, and that's why we're having these lawsuits, that OCR's interpretive position is not a valid one under the law, and it should not be entitled to deference from the courts. So it's complex, and it's hard to get it down into a channel. I get asked a lot of yes/no questions that they're not really good for yes/no. So I think that's I've covered everything I want to do. If you want to talk about Texas, I could do that as well, because I'm familiar with the
All right,
filings there.
before I go to Texas,
Mhm.
the OCR's interpretation, while not in itself having the force of law, I have been receiving the impression that due to the circuit court's opinion, that has almost de facto given it the force of law. Is that not true?
In the jurisdictions, in the states, the geographic areas that are subject to the jurisdiction of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, it is a declaration of law. The
And-
Fourth Circuit does not declare law for anywhere else in the country. We gotta wait for the Supreme Court to do that.
Okay, now I hear you, but I've also heard that logically speaking, the Third Circuit could be expected to, before the Supreme Court decision, could be expected to hew to the line of the Fourth Circuit. In effect, creating this concept that even though it doesn't directly have the force of law, it is de facto creating a force of law through the Fourth Circuit and by extension precedent to the Third Circuit. So I would say that your statements are nuanced, but we're talking about what is precise and what is practical, and how we've been interpreting what's practical, I think, is maybe creating some of this confusion.
Right.
Is that a fair
Yeah,
statement?
I think it is. There are departments of political science in every college and university in the nation, and they have a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to read the tea leaves in local and state courts and in the federal courts, particularly in the Supreme Court. Law schools are full of professors, okay, and everyone tries to make these predictions. As I've said on a number of other issues, and one of the jobs of a lawyer to a client, of a solicitor to this entity, is try to predict what the court would do if this client was in that court. So as we all try to predict things, I think there is a sentiment, a belief, throughout the country. Some circuits are more liberal and some are more conservative. The Third Circuit would typically be thought of as more liberal. It comprises the mid-Atlantic states. It would be thought of as more conservative than people whose cultures arise from the Deep South, perhaps. That's just, I'm not making this up here or casting any aspersions. These are realities. The Fourth Circuit, I think many of us were surprised being seated in Richmond, in old Virginia. There was some surprise that the Fourth Circuit was as deferential to OCR on this. You would have been less surprised perhaps if it had been the Third Circuit or the Second Circuit in New York, or perhaps the Ninth Circuit in California. So certainly it doesn't bind, but you start thinking, well, if the judges of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals were persuaded by this, does that make it suggest more or less likely that the judges of the Third Circuit would also adopt that position? A betting man would say yes.
Isn't it, can I just, one add-on, isn't it also true, though, that they said that if privacy was brought forward as a part of the complaint or as part of the case, they would have given deference to that? Privacy was not an element and did not receive deference, but they said if it was, that was part of their ruling.
You know what, the Fourth Circuit?
Yes.
No, I think when a court says that a particular issue had not been brought squarely before it, the court is not going to tip its hand. What the court is going to do is say, we're basing our decision on this set of facts, this set of legal
Right,
theories.
I know that.
We are not answering the question over here. They leave it open. I don't know that you would read that or read into it to say, if it were, we would have gone another way.
I saw it written up as such, that if it was an element of, I can find it, I don't have it right in front of me, but if it was, if privacy was an element of the case, they would have given deference to the privacy issue. because it was not part of the case.
Well, I know that Judge Niemeyer, the dissenting vote in the Fourth Circuit, honed in on the privacy issue very, very specifically. And again, his argument, his statements are a very good articulation of the rationale supporting the conclusion he would have come to. The other two jurists disagreed. I just happened, I'm looking, I have the Fourth Circuit, opinion here. I could canvass it, but I think one of the things we all have to be careful about, regardless of disposition or preferred outcome or how we think about and process these things, is if we want to talk about what any court said, we have to cut through all of the reportage and go exactly into the decisions and the opinions. Because people so many times, we all hear what we want to hear, is the confirmation bias, and we will extract from this person's statement something that validates mine, whether it's really there, really intended to be or not. And that's kind of funny. I guess Mr. Gallagher's view is that, why do we need a lawyer to do all this? Why do you need 9 judges on the Supreme Court? Because people are of differing minds, to bring all these things. We have to have odd-numbered people, odd-numbered panels on borough councils and school boards and judicial panels and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Just to clear real quick, 2 things. The first thing is the mechanics of the appeal to the Fourth Circuit. Was it the appeals to the 3 judges or to the whole? Is it 9 or 19 judges?
When you file an appeal from the district court to an appellate court, the appellate court decides whether the case will be assigned to a panel or to the court en banc, meaning, the group of them.
So in lay terms, who decided not to hear the appeal in the Fourth Circuit?
And who decided not to have it presented to the entire court?
Correct.
The entire court.
Okay.
The entire court. When it first comes through, the court mechanisms and the chief judges and the presiding judges, they have a judge that works day by day to handle stuff, the business of the court, and that changes. Case comes through, it is typically going to be assigned to a panel of judges. All cases are most likely to be assigned to a panel. And it's only if someone makes an application, even at the outset, to say, we would like this heard before the entire court, which doesn't happen real often, or in the event of a panel decision, you ask for re-argument before the entire panel. That's the way it is in Pennsylvania appellate courts and the federal courts as well. So when the application for re-argument was made, the court declined that.
And are those decisions documented and available for the public?
I get the orders right here. Upon the petition for such and such, ruling denied.
Okay. Before we go to Texas, could you just clarify the Supreme Court's calendar? You suggested that the earliest they might decide on whether or not to take the appeal is October-ish.
Yeah.
What's the latest?
Oh, well, there's nobody to tell them to speed it up. But I would think they make the decisions on whether to grant appeals either in October up into December or early January, because when they grant them, when they grant these writs, they want to do so that the paperwork and all that can be developed, filed, and arguments can be had in the winter and spring, so they can make decisions by the end of their term, which is usually in June.
Okay.
And they have a 8-month or an 8-week, 8 or 9-week break. But there's always somebody down there. The court's never totally closed. That's why even though they were in recess, the application for a stay was delivered to the Chief Justice. Rather than acting upon it himself, he referred the matter out to the entire court. And when you read the order on the stay, they were 4-4 on whether to grant the stay or not, which would have meant no stay. Justice Breyer moved his vote to make it 5-3 to grant a stay, but he notes in his statement that he didn't want it to be, he said there's 4 people that want to grant it. I don't want the thing locked down because it's a 4-4 tie. So he joined the majority, in his own words, as a courtesy. So we really don't know what Justice Breyer is, whether he's going to vote to grant an appeal or what he's going to do if an appeal comes. That's the problem with reading tea leaves with this business.
But you would
Thank you.
submit that Stephen Breyer knew exactly what he was doing when he cast that vote to throw this back in there. He knew what expectation he was creating when he did this. He could have
I'm
quashed
sure-
it. He could have quashed it. He had the opportunity to quash it, as you said. He could have said, no, we don't want to do this. We're not going to deal with it. We're going to let the Fourth Circuit go. He said no, but he said no. He's going to drag this out, and he is restoring that school's ability to do what they were doing beforehand.
He knows that the immediate impact of his joining would be to stay the implementation of the district court's injunction.
And he also
Okay.
knows that this is not an island.
Well, I'm
that
sure.
everybody in the country is watching.
These guys, these are smart men and women
Yes.
who make it to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And they know when they throw a rock in the pond.
Yeah.
And, I trust on a human level that they try to measure out whether the ripples of it are something that is worthwhile, and whether that is in a procedural way or in a substantive way. It could very well be that Justice Breyer voted to grant a stay, and he could in fact vote to grant the appeal, and then at the end of the appeal, vote to affirm the Fourth Circuit. You see, as I've said before, sometimes when somebody, well, do I have to make this motion or come out? A person here, can say, oh, I'll make a motion or I'll second something just so that people can discuss it. But I fully intend to vote against it. Making a motion doesn't mean you have to vote for it. Making a second doesn't mean you have to vote for it. So that's why I say, well, Justice Breyer came over. Well, of course, he's going to go with this, and then he's going to vote to reverse.
But he also knows that when he does that, you have a situation where the Fourth Circuit says you have to defer to the OCR. You have to do, their interpretation of the law is what counts. And now Stephen Breyer says, no, it isn't until I say it isn't.
Well, that's where our minds naturally want to presuppose that there's content to it that isn't necessarily there. That isn't necessarily there. The stay is only until they consider whether to grant an appeal. I mean, there's a lot of cases where stays are granted, and then the underlying order is ultimately affirmed.
How can the OCR then enforce its interpretation of the law when the Supreme Court has this in abeyance, in limbo? How can they do this?
Well, what can happen is OCR, and take it out of this context, and then bring it back to it. An administrative agency can take a position, and they can try to impose and force their position. Suppose it's an environmental case or something on a particular industry or this sort of thing, and issue orders and assess penalties and all that. Now, there could be a very similar legal issue pending in another court, sitting in another part of the state, sitting in another state, sitting in another circuit, and the agency doesn't have to change its mind or change its position just because a court has said in a particular case over here where a particular remedy has been imposed that we're going to put a stay on that remedy. That's how cases get into the circuits, and you have conflicting decisions between circuit courts, which is the major determinant of whether the Supreme Court hears an appeal. If OCR, for instance, if OCR were to walk away from all the other possible cases that dig in its heels on this one, you'd never have a conflict in it. Things have to progress down the line, up the line, I guess, up the line is better, up the line before you have that kind of conflict. And many, many cases go to the Supreme Court because the Fifth Circuit decided a case this way, but the 11th Circuit decided another, and they put that right in the first couple of paragraphs. A conflict has arisen. We granted certiorari to resolve the conflict and we hereby reverse, or we hereby affirm. So,
We do not yet have that conflict, right?
what's that?
We do not yet have that conflict.
No, because you do not have a decision in a circuit court about this particular issue, other than the Fourth Circuit.
Let me back that up. The Third Circuit did in fact vote the other way.
No, Third Circuit has had no case. There was a case came out of Pitt.
Yeah.
It came out of Pitt. It was, I mean, bathrooms are bathrooms, but it was cast a little differently legally in terms of the legal theories. And the district court found against the student. The student appealed to the Third Circuit, and then Pitt settled the case,
Before they ruled.
did their policy. And so what you'll see on the Third Circuit docket, it says dismissed, but that's what they write for anything that's settled. They're dismissed upon agreement. So you can look and say, oh, they dismissed it, they must not have liked it. Say, no, that's just a word they use when people settle cases. So,
So, right now, legally, without fear of reparations, Gloucester can segregate their restrooms based on biology, correct?
until such time as the stay
Okay.
is evaporated.
Right now, okay, so.
Yes and no questions, I don't give them up easily.
The U.S. Attorney's Office is currently defending cases against them. This is separate from the Supreme Court. They're defending cases against them. In their statements, they're defending themselves because the claims were made that the schools and the states harm is being caused. They say there's no harm here because this is simply guidance. And the guidance is simply guidance. It's not binding. So therefore, you can't claim harm if it's only guidance. And if that's the case, this is the U.S. Department, U.S. Attorney's
Right.
stance on
I have it right
the
here.
OCR guidance. That it's simply guidance, so therefore it can't be harming. If it can't be harming, that means the $1.4 million that people worry about in our case, if that's not a real threat, then that goes away.
Well, the reason that the Department of Justice takes the position in the Texas case that there's no risk of immediate harm is that the Department of Justice, OCR, the other federal agencies are not themselves at this point prosecuting anybody in Texas to take away their money. If they were to do so, that would create the case. Think of it, an embezzlement statute. If you haven't been charged with embezzlement, you can't go to court and ask the court to invalidate some part of the embezzlement statute because it's contrary to due process or it doesn't respect this right or the other right. You have to have some sort of case or controversy, and in Palatine, they were there. They were live. They were going after them, and that was a live case which got settled. In Delaware Valley, OCR was there pressing an issue. It was a real live case, but Delaware Valley sorted it out. They sorted it out and didn't go. Those entities, when a challenge is made, they can have a day in court. After they passed HB 2 in North Carolina, okay, the Department of Justice did immediately file suit against the state of North Carolina. So there they took an action. The risk of loss to North Carolina isn't just floating out there in the air because somebody, well, maybe they did or didn't violate. The Department of Justice is suing North Carolina. They are saying in the affirmative, you absolutely violated the law. We are exposing you to whatever, $875 million a year in potential losses.
So how can they then turn around and defend themselves with the same guidance?
Because-
How can they defend themselves and say, well, it's not harmful?
Well, no, what they're saying is there is no immediate exposure to harm in the Texas case. There's no immediate exposure because they're not trying to enforce this on Texas. And if they go to do something in a Texas case or in a school district or in a municipality or at a college level, you'll have a live case and people can join and argue and defend and prosecute and do all that stuff.
But they're blackmailing these districts. They're basically saying, we are going to fight you with the full force of the federal government. You can take us on, or you can settle. And then they say, okay, but there's no harm because you settled, but you settled because we're forcing you to settle because we have so much more power than you do. They're putting a gun to your head. No, this is what they're doing. They're putting a gun to your head, and they're saying, sign on the dotted line, or we'll shoot. And there's no harm until I shoot.
Well, all I want to do here is say, that's politics, and I don't have an opinion on that. When we get to these things, I talk.
What is the difference between reality and what I said?
The big reality I have a problem is when this discussion comes, everybody looks at me, okay? I'm not a district court judge. I'm not on the Circuit Court of Appeal. I'm not a deputy secretary in the United States Department of Justice. I'm trying to be a lawyer here, telling you where's the lane, where when can the ball go in the gutter, that sort of thing.
I look to you because you are the one who will understand where they're coming from. I'm not linking you to their decision.
I feel a lot better.
What I'm saying is this is what I perceive the federal government to be doing. They're holding a gun to our head and saying, there's no harm until I actually pull the trigger.
Well, for instance,
and because there's no harm, you can't fight back.
Well, just as in the present circumstances here at the school district, your present, status quo in fact, they can't do anything to you. They can't sue you because you haven't taken an adverse position to them. Nor could you go forward at this point on your status quo in fact and sue OCR or sue the federal government. Because right now you're having a very very energized political and social debate. Okay, in the broad context of a bigger social and legal debate, and some of that debate has found its way into the courts. Okay, there's that's where you are, but it's not as though you at this point could go file a lawsuit against the United States government.
Let me suggest to you this.
Why would you want to?
Well, no, I'm just saying, from a standpoint of what we've been doing and how this has changed, during the course of these 6 months that we've been debating this.
Mm-hmm.
It looked for a while as though, at least my reading of the tea leaves, not just from what you've said, but from what I've studied, was
I know you've read pretty extensively.
that not only if we went to court do we stand to lose on the bathrooms, we would stand to lose in the locker rooms and everybody else where the Obama administration says we have to comply. And this has always been my concern about all this. And I'm not sure, so what I'm saying, what we're hearing now is despite the fact that there seems to be some evidence of backpedaling in the other direction, we're still a long way from any assurance that that wouldn't happen.
Well, if you read what Texas wrote, which is one getting all the headlines, if you read what the Department of Justice submitted in the Texas case, okay, which is what's getting all the headlines as DOJ backpedaling, DOJ has not changed its position that sex under Title IX includes sexual orientation and includes gender identity. It has not changed its position. What it is saying in those filings is that this lawsuit is not ripe, that it's not timely to file this lawsuit when none of the participating plaintiffs have themselves been threatened, threatened legally. Everybody knows there's pressure moving both ways in our culture on this issue, but they're saying that as lawyers and their technicalities, that as of this point in time, the Texas lawsuit is premature, and that the court should not, in that case, get to the question of whether OCR's position is right or wrong. Now, we all know from reading at large and from hearing the debates in your own forum here, that this is not a matter that comes to unanimity of opinion, even on a social basis, in a lot of different places. You have districts that have unanimously moved in the direction of identity-based access. You have districts that are on the dodge, trying to stay in the shadows and handle it ad hoc. And then you have a very robust debate going on here
But
within your
would you
board.
not submit then, however, though, that Justice Kennedy, who's normally, at least from my understanding, he's normally a very libertarian justice, for him to side with wanting to hear the case, or wanting to stay the case, excuse me, and then Stephen Breyer, who generally votes with the liberal ones, and who obviously knows what he's doing, throwing this back there, would you not consider that some possible backpedaling in the grand scheme of things? You say, well, there's no backpedaling in the Justice Department. Maybe there isn't, but maybe there is from the Supreme Court.
When I'm in this kind of forum, I put a lot of energy into trying to stay a very analytical lawyer and not become a talking head on TV. Okay, you got a lot of bright men and women in the courts. You got a lot of bright men and women in the media talking about this as well. If I went there, I go, well, on the one hand, it does suggest that, but on the other hand, it doesn't at all, because you could see they were at 4-4 whether to grant a stay, and you don't know I mean, we may as well, if you want to go in, look at some more of the tea leaves, okay? The Obergefell's decision about gay marriage was decided 5-4. Breyer and Kennedy were in the 5 that said, we're going to find that there's a fundamental constitutional right for gay marriage in this country, okay? To the great dismay of many of our countrymen. Well, you might have thought, well, if this case got there, which is now a 5-3 decision because Scalia, so if the same kind of thing comes to this 8-person court, why would you expect a different decision? It would be 5-3 instead of 5-4. So now you have this type case coming up, and you think, well, what can I divine from the Obergefell case and where those justices were in Obergefell that might help me make a bet on the outcome of the Fourth Circuit case? And where your tea leaves were looking one way, all of a sudden, the odds makers in Vegas have to say, well, that might not be the right line, because we don't know what Breyer or Kennedy might do in terms of allowing an appeal, or do they, in fact, grant the stay, bring the case up specifically so that they can vote to affirm it?
The big difference is they've spent a lot of energy over the years building the case for privacy that is not included as part of the discussion in the gay marriage case. So it's hard for a layperson to imagine that in one move they just completely ignore all of the case law that essentially has defined a citizen's right to privacy that isn't guaranteed in the Constitution explicitly.
That's right. It's in the penumbra of First Amendment rights.
That sounds like legalistic version of backpedaling to me.
Well, I'll leave that to you and other minds.
I mean, it's not, my question is how far does it have to backpedal before I feel reassured, but I consider it to be backpedaling.
Well, are we talking about Breyer and Kennedy, or are we talking about Department of Justice?
I'm talking about Breyer and Kennedy. Because right now, whatever the Department of Justice does is going to end up deferring to what the Supreme Court decides.
Oh yeah, the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court gets to a decision on the merits about what the word sex means in Title IX, well, there's an old saying that says the Supreme Court is not infallible because it's final. Did I have this right? It's not final because it's infallible, but it's infallible because it's final. Once those justices say, this law applies to this situation in this manner, there's nobody else to complain to. And
Until the next court.
Well, it took them how many
So
years?
a new Supreme Court reverses it.
Yeah. Well, it took them 60 years to deal with Plessy versus Ferguson, so.
So again, if we play this movie out, and let's go back to the resolution that I put forth. If we play that resolution forward, that resolution is very close to the GG.
Oh, yeah, it's
Okay.
pretty much spot on.
So then if we play that out, we go to our district court, which our precedent at the district court that we would go to, their precedent is in favor of that position. That allows segregation based on biology. Whether it was settled another way.
Okay.
The actual court decision was allowed.
Okay, but let's watch the use of precedent. There is the Pitt case, which went this way. That is not a binding precedent. If the Pitt case had gone to the Third Circuit, and the Third Circuit had said, yes, Pitt can exclude whatever the person's name was, I forget. Okay, yeah, it was somebody named Johnston. It was Johnston in Johnstown. That's all I remember. That's right, it's Johnston. Okay, they could exclude this Johnston person. Well, that would be binding on all the district courts in Pennsylvania, Maryland, all these other things that encompass the Third Circuit. But a decision by a single judge in a district court is not binding upon another judge in that court. Now, the analysis is there. This judge could find it persuasive. This judge could say, I think I'm going to go with this just because I want to push this up. I want to create a conflict in the circuits. And judges sometimes think that way. So, yeah, you had the Johnstown case, but it doesn't control in terms of what happens in a next case here.
But if there was a next case, okay, assuming this resolution, win or lose, if it gets bumped up to the next stage and then gets bumped to the final stage, because the next would be the Third Circuit, I believe, and then the next stage would be the Supreme. Right now, that precedence is it's a stay until we figure out. So essentially, until they figure out that stay, if that resolution passes, that can be in place until that stay is either eliminated or they decide to hear the case, at which time a case couldn't move forward until the Supreme Court makes a final decision. Regardless of what that final decision is, I'm saying at this point, as we move forward, that resolution likely, legally, based on current precedent from the Supreme Court, would stay until the Supreme Court makes their decision.
I'm not entirely confident of that, because the stay is just a stay, and the opinions are out there. The Supreme Court jurisprudence is replete with, don't read more into our stays than you should.
But the local point is, no other action likely would occur until they move.
Well, there's a couple ways to go down the path. You have you move to resolution 2, and that would require a change in your factual status quo. You would have an arguably aggrieved person. That person could file a lawsuit and ask for a preliminary injunction. And the court there might say, what the Supreme Court really did was preserve the status quo as it sat in Gloucester. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to preserve the status quo as it sits in Pine-Richland, even though those are different status quos. That's not the right word.
But in our case, that's not documented. That position is not documented.
Yeah, exactly. And
Well,
the
it-
The
factual,
documented status quo is contrary to that.
The factual status quo will readily be established by the testimony of witnesses on behalf of the plaintiff.
yes,
Sure.
no,
That's
the,
documented to be contrary to what the perceived status quo is.
But a court's going to look at what the factual status quo is.
the factual,
The factual is written down.
No, the factual is what's factual. The factual status quo here is that you've had at least 2 transgender female students using girls' restrooms. That is the factual status quo. And the court will look, should I enter an order that preserves that status quo, or should I not enter an order?
And
preserves that.
but therein lies the debate, because the factual status quo, we wouldn't have been discussing this for 7 months now if the factual status quo was a board decision. It wasn't. It was a circuitous route that was not a factual status. So the status quo is in fact biologically distinct restrooms. So that can be argued either way. And one thing that is just really getting old is this, constant going down these rabbit holes of maybe, could be, should be. The fact is that there is no policy, there's a practice. This board has been wrestling, and we have board minutes to prove it, and there is no court that will ignore the struggle that we have been through. And there's going to be testimony on both sides. And so any court that would ignore the entire picture would not be, that just won't happen. So I'm just done with these rabbit holes. We have a Supreme Court stay that is factual. So any maybe, lawsuit that could be brought against us right now may or may not follow the stay. And the stay would be directly linked to the content of how the complaint was filed. So what I am discerning from all of this, current information is that this threat of this losing money, which is where we've gotten stalled for the whole time, is about the losing money. But we have now been handed to us, if it's agreed upon by the majority of the board, we have facts that say our factual status quo, backed up by this board and the decision that we did not make together, is a practice, a standing practice of biologically distinct restrooms. Because I just read through a fair amount of this Gloucester 69 pages ruling. And what I see there is exactly what we've been through. Exactly. Very similar. So I would like to move forward with, not going down rabbit holes. Let's get back to our resolution at hand that Greg has brought forward to us that would be very supported by the Supreme Court information as well as the Texas information that Scott Gagliardi brought to our attention. I mean, I knew about it, but he reiterated at the beginning of the meeting. So I think that my suggestion would be that we consider just moving into looking at Greg's resolution. In fact, I would like to make a motion at this time to vote on the resolution that was brought forward by Greg DiTullio at our previous meeting and voted on. Do I have a second?
We don't have a full board, Teresa.
Well, we have the opportunity to vote. If we know what our votes need to be, there is no reason not to vote on this, because it is before school. We promised this community that we would have a decision for them. We have new information. It would be obscene for us to ignore this new information. Obscene.
I'm torn because two members that are absent likely put the vote where I'd want it to go, but we don't have a full board.
We can always see how the vote goes.
I can't second.
Can anybody second it?
I don't want to, remember, I'm never one for enforcing like rules like to the discouragement of action and things, but remember, the technical thing is if you have a motion and you don't have a second, then your motion's not there for discussion. I never jump up on that one way or another.
That's fine.
But it's just something to remember as you proceed as a deliberative body. You have to do this, you got to do 1,000 other things too. I can't tell you what you're supposed to do.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did I misunderstand?
She made a motion. I didn't hear anybody second it, which means it kind of dies where it is.
Restate your motion, please.
If you want to have a discussion about my suggestion to make the motion to vote, then you can second it. If you don't want to, and you want to keep down the discussion that Pat is having, we can continue that, and I may or may not bring up the motion again.
I'll second the motion to discuss it further.
I do, I do agree somewhat with Mr. Stegman that we have sort of made a commitment that if we have this, a vote of this magnitude, we're going to have the full board, we're going to have notification beforehand. And for that reason, I'm not in favor of having this vote at this time. If the board, if it is the pleasure of the board to overrule this decision of mine, 4 votes will do it. So if you want to declare yourselves, please do.
Well, are you exercising the prerogative of your chair
Yes.
to declare something out of order?
Yes.
Okay, now what happens then is somebody can appeal the ruling of the chair. And appeal requires a second, and then you vote. Sort of like a table, removed from the table, all this other sort of thing.
Okay.
So it sounds to me
I
like,
appeal the ruling of the
Okay.
chair.
and then if anybody seconds the appeal, or it stands with Dr. Banyas saying this is not timely or in order until another time.
In other words, if 4 of us say we still want to have the option to vote today, we can. So I appeal the prerogative of the chair
Mhm.
and would ask for a second.
And a second of the appeal then opens the discussion to the appeal, correct?
Well, it overrides what Dr. Banyas has done, because you have a motion on the floor right now.
Right, but this is.
And he said it's out of order, so this is one of these procedural things. You should kind of vote on the appeal, because if you sustain the, if you do not sustain the appeal, then the discussion stops. So you don't want to discuss whether to discuss. That's why you use these type of procedural motions. So on an appeal, people should vote immediately on the appeal, because if the board defers to his ruling, then that's the end of it.
So there's no discussion, that just goes right to a vote?
On an appeal, but I haven't heard a second to the appeal.
Greg, do you just second it?
I'll second the appeal.
Okay,
'cause
then
I
you have a
wanted to
vote.
discuss the appeal, but, okay. So there's no,
Vote on the appeal.
so there's no discussion on the appeal, correct?
That's my belief. Give me that pamphlet. This is the one I want.
Oh, all right.
Okay, requires a second. Debatable, no.
Okay.
So no debate.
We'll have a roll call vote then, Ms. Williams.
Now, just to understand,
This is only on the appeal.
this is on the
Only
appeal.
on the appeal.
And a vote yes is to override Dr. Banyas.
Which
So
then
that
just
we
allows
can
discussion.
further the discussion to vote or not to vote.
Right. Yeah.
Correct.
A yes overrides Dr. Banyas, and the
Because-
motion you made is sitting there to be discussed.
Right. Okay.
Does this need a 5, or does this need a?
The majority of who's here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna,
Means
you have a
4.
split, you'll get it. I mean, you'll get a decision out of this vote.
All right.
Mr. Sundo?
No.
Mr. Stegman?
No.
Ms. Dawson?
Yes.
Dr. Banyas?
No.
Mr. DiTullio?
Yes.
Ms. Goble?
No.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes.
It's 3 to 4.
Okay, so the chair's ruling stands.
So the motion is now.
Yeah, the
done,
motion's out of order.
discussion.
It can be renewed at a later time.
So that moves us to 10:03, as I read it.
We can still.
Unless there's
talk-
any further discussion on the legal update.
Yeah, I mean.
If there's more.
We're still asking Pat questions. I was just sort of like, I've heard enough of the, rabbit holes, and that's why I went that way.
Sooner or later, you're going to go down one of them.
Well, here's, I guess, since we were still in discussion and question mode, I guess my question in general is, to what benefit does it provide for us to have heard 7 months of, testimony from ourselves, from the community, from our own personal study, and now from the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And if you read through some of these other briefs, that in fact what I personally have been saying all along is that this amounts to guidance. It is not legally binding. So, whether or not the full board is here, I look at it this way. We made a commitment to this community to have some decision before the beginning of the school year. So now if we go into the next meeting, there will be some pushback, from what I understand, that it's too close to the school year and we shouldn't vote. And I think that is just, it is obscene. I think it's obscene because we are not fulfilling our commitment to this community to vote and to have, last time we voted, but it was split. So in fact, it was not a vote. It was split because we didn't have the full board. So if we're gonna keep being absent, this board will never move forward. So either we're committed to serve the community or we're not. And that's a whole separate discussion about who's committed and who's not, because it's just getting ridiculous.
I think that's a fair point, that I think that we do need to get a commitment from 9 members to either be present or to call in so that everyone votes. I don't wish to repeat the last experience where we don't have everybody here. Hence my rationale for that. I also, I still have concerns that if we take a risk and pass this resolution and that writ of certiorari is not upheld, that we could lose some of the protections that we do have for privacy if the OCR tries to enforce its will on our locker rooms. And so that's always been a concern of mine throughout all of this. So.
What's a concern of mine is that we have 9th graders coming to our school in a few weeks. And I had one of my daughters say, who's a senior this year, talk about how she cried when she was going to 9th grade because it's scary. It's a scary place. And we have had moms in this and dads in this room tell us how this makes them uncomfortable. And now we have the Supreme Court offering us this opportunity, a huge opportunity. And we are just pushing it aside because we're smarter than them. Yet we will not protect our 9th graders or any student for that matter in the whole picture. We're missing the big picture here. And that's where I'm staying on this. That's my stand.
We have another meeting. I haven't heard this objection that now we're too close to a school year to vote. I certainly wouldn't assimilate to that. So I don't understand why simply between now and the next meeting, voting again on the resolutions is on the agenda. What's preventing that from happening? Say again?
Well, that is 2 days before the opening of school.
Okay.
And that it does create a significant distraction.
Versus not doing anything.
Versus not doing anything, or versus having it after the students are in school for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is before the next meeting. That's the argument that we have heard, that particular date is disadvantageous to institute a policy when the new students are coming in.
I disagree.
So, I mean, you don't have to agree with it,
I
but
know.
that's what
I
I've
disagree.
heard.
Which is, you know, again, one of the reasons I wanted to appeal what the president said. Because I don't agree that this should, okay, what are we going to do? We have all this strategy Dr. Pasquinelli's telling us about for education. We're focused on learning, and now we're gonna go into a whole next year focused on bathrooms again.
I think we'll be focused on bathrooms if we make the decision that way, too. We'll be focused on lawsuits. I mean, I'm not sure that there's an escape from
But
this.
it's out of
one way or the other.
but it's out of the hallways then, is it not?
You think?
I naively want to believe that. Right now, it's in the hallways. And at least if one direction or another is chosen, it's no longer the kids' issue, it's ours. And that's where it belongs.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
I
Because this
understand,
is-
Doctor, I do understand the strategy, I support it, but we can't keep sitting on the fence.
I hear you. I understand. At
this stage, it doesn't matter to me which way it
I wish I could
falls.
compel 9 board members
I
to appear.
understand. So our only option is it gets on the agenda for the next meeting. And whoever chooses to show up is their choice, but what other option do we have? Right now, it's in the hallways. The anecdotal evidence supports that. If it becomes legal, now it's an adult issue, and it's out of the hallways.
I don't know that that gets it out of the hallway. I'm not
I don't
exactly
either, but
sure
I'm-
what you mean, but.
I don't want the kids to have to worry about it. It's not their issue, it's ours, it's the adult issue.
Well, it will always be the kids' issue also. They're the ones that are there. So I
Then
understand.
maybe at least
I
the
think-
ambivalence, at least to get the ambivalence out.
Okay, well, you know, we can go through the same exercise we just did if we want to try and vote tonight. I mean, I'm just saying, if we want to try and vote tonight and there's enough of you, look, it's the same story the next one. Then it's going to be another story. Either we want to have a vote, and I know you just said you don't want to have a vote, but with this next consideration, maybe we should vote.
Well, I would ask if one of you want to change your vote.
Well, just so you know what you're doing. Technically, under the rules, an appeal cannot be renewed, but
Oh.
you can always suspend all your rules. Remember, people aren't here to serve the rules. The rules are here to keep your business organized. The template that you've agreed to operate on at this point says motion, second, out of order, appeal denied. motion's
No,
not there.
I don't, I see it more long-term damaging if we do not at least try one formal time to get the full board here to vote on this issue. If it fails, ask me again next time. But we've got one more opportunity before school starts.
And what if the full board isn't here, Steve? Then
Okay,
what?
then ask me at that point. But at least one time, everybody gets a chance to participate. Right now, it just feels like a backdoor move, a subversive move, because 2 no votes are not here.
Well, I don't see it that way at all. I see it as we have wasted the time that we have had to get an answer for this community. That's what
Teresa,
I see it
I'm
as.
at the end of my rope as well, but I'll give it one shot.
I mean, we don't
With proper
stop-
notification, a message from the president, look, this is what we're attempting to do here. You have your voice heard, the full
Well,
board.
You know,
Take-
if there's sick people in the hospital and 2 people call off and we're short 1,
I
and
get
we
it.
get only replacement for 1, we don't say, sorry, we can't take care of sick people.
I get it, I know.
I understand the concerns for not voting 2 days before school, but if this is brought up 2 days before school, I will vote for it. I will vote on the matter, because I do agree. I think we owe the community a definitive vote, and a 4-4 vote was not a definitive vote. We need a definitive vote one way or another with a majority. We told everyone we were gonna do that. That's why we agreed to not have the resolution. That's one of the reasons why it was agreed to not have the resolution passed way back before the end of last school year. We told the community we would have something in place. We've got nothing in place. I understand the concerns with before school. I do. But if it's brought up, I won't bring it up. But if it's brought up, I will vote on it, and I will vote to vote on it if it's deemed out of order. I do think we owe the community a vote.
Okay, so that puts it back in the president's seat. Are we going to be able to vote on this at the next meeting, and are we going to put it on the agenda or not? And are we going to require that all board members are physically present or call in or not? It's a voting meeting.
Does anyone have an objection to doing that?
I think that's what I'm asking for.
I understand. I'm just asking if everyone has an objection.
Putting it on the agenda for the 22nd.
Correct.
So I'll turn to the board at 10, because I want to hear from the administration, because I think that's, a discussion that needs to be had.
You want a yes, no, or are you willing to hear my thinking?
I'm willing to hear your thing, because I had a discussion with you, so I
Okay.
understand it.
As superintendent of schools, I think it's a complex issue. It's my perspective. With a commission in Pennsylvania as the superintendent of schools, I take an oath to do a lot of responsibilities. Those are to meet the policies and expectations of Pine-Richland and also within the Commonwealth. Earlier tonight, Pat described this in his dialogue as, quote, energized political and social debate. I thought it was a good description of what's happening across the country. As the superintendent of schools, I do not believe that it's my responsibility to pick and choose when I get clear guidance from OCR. With that said, I have articulated the fact that I think the clarification of OCR language in May was surprising in its breadth and depth and reach. There's a lot to it. Mr. Kenny can probably agree, it's about as clear as any language that has ever come out from OCR. So that's what's presented to schools. To suggest it is simple, in my opinion, professionally, 21 years, 16 in administration with a lot of experience, is not giving fair consideration to a pretty complex topic. So when asked to weigh in during these 6 months, I believed that the conversation around a hybrid policy was one worth having. When Dr. Banyas put forward thoughtfully a hybrid policy, that is a policy that fully acknowledges the exact language of OCR in some instances, such as a student who shares that they are a transgender female, has the right to be called by a female preferred name with a female pronoun. There are aspects of OCR's language that I believe the board is fully in agreement on. There are other aspects where the board clearly is not, which is why no vote was passed at this point, specifically around bathrooms, locker rooms. We've been saying for 6 months it is legally unsettled, and it is still my professional certified opinion based on my own reading of all of this, which I have taken seriously, is that it is still unsettled. I will say to the board and to the community that Gehring, Rutter, and Beam's advice is not unique to Gehring, Rutter, and Beam. Gehring, Rutter, and Beam's advice on this matter to the board publicly and privately in executive session and through correspondence is similar to other solicitor firms in Western Pennsylvania that support a significant number of schools. I hope that our full board and our community is aware of that. It is not a Pat Clare thing as the solicitor within the firm of Gehring, Rutter, and Beam. I care very deeply about the individual students involved, and I care very deeply about every other student. And to Mrs. Dawson's point, I want every one of our kids to feel good about coming to our high school in the fall. without getting into specifics, which I won't do, this practice began without my awareness. Without my awareness. And I said that on April 18th. And in fact, continued for a period of time, years, before it became known. When it was known, I was not clear in the information that I was given, and I take responsibility for that, for not being clear in the late fall. Nonetheless, we find ourselves in the midst of a complex topic that is happening in different areas around the country, but to focus specifically on Pine-Richland, it is a decision in front of us tonight, or the last meetings. It was my recommendation to board leadership, given the 6 months and the fact that no definitive decision was made, that I did not feel after 6 or 7 months of discussion that having the decision the night before, the day before the first day of school, was in the best interest of anyone. If that's when the decision is made, then I will respond to it. And depending on what the decision is or vote, either direction will cause a set of dominoes to get knocked over in which we will respond. So to make that clear, if a vote occurs on the 22nd, or tonight, if it occurs on the 22nd, and it's Resolution 2, which Mr. DiTullio brought forward, then, and that passes, then I see 2 immediate actions. One, we need to, through our high school, communicate directly with affected students in small number, one-on-one, and we need to communicate more broadly so that people understand and have clarity about what was passed by the board, and that's how we begin the year. If the decision is not to support resolution number 2, then we continue in a situation that has been in place during this dialogue. I don't know what else to say. So is it my preference? No. But will I? Absolutely, I will handle it, and I will handle it professionally, and I will communicate, and we will do everything we need to do, irregardless of the decision. If you're asking me if it's my preference, it isn't. There's a board meeting on September 12th. There's a board meeting tonight. So does that answer?
Are you suggesting that after the commencement of the school year is preferred? And if so, why?
I'm not saying I'm saying that it's preferred from my perspective, as opposed to trying to, on one day, our board meetings are at night. That gives Tuesday, prior to the start of school, to put a lot of things in motion. It's not an excuse. It's not a complaint. There's a number of things that will need to happen immediately in order to respond to a decision, depending on what the decision might be. So that forces, after a period of 7 months, a communication on the issue. If that's the decision, then that's what it is. The question I guess you're asking is, do I see professionally harm in continuing what's going on for the 2 weeks I don't. I don't see that concern. That's my answer. That's my professional opinion too.
What I'm not hearing is what's different between August 21st and September 12th.
For me, it's August 22nd is our meeting. August 23rd, there are a myriad of things happening in many families across this district as you get ready for the first day of school. We are attempting to deal and communicate with something at that moment, right as many other things are happening in households. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't believe that necessarily is the best time. So my recommendation to board leadership, when we had our phone conversation last week, was having a decision tonight, having a decision on September 12th would be my preference. It would not be my preference for those reasons to try to do it in one day and get that information out. But I will certainly do it if that's the way the cards are.
Well, Teresa, I would not I would defer to the administration on this from a timing perspective and ultimately accept the position of asking the community for a little more time. If we subscribe to the mission, that's what we should do.
Well, I appreciate that, Steve, but I look at it this way. You know, summer, okay, everybody has things going on, and you know, people miss meetings from time
Yep.
to time, but, you know, this particular issue hasn't exactly brought about definitive, you know, I'm gonna vote. And we just keep kicking this down the street. And I think it is unfair. We are advocates for the community. I hear Dr. Miller's tone, which I'm just going to be honest with you. Your tone's a little bit like, you know, edgy. I get it, you're edgy. But, you know, we're all in this together.
Agreed.
And you sound a little defensive, and
I
I don't
don't.
appreciate it. Because, look, it has occurred, don't tell him to shut me off. Don't tell
I
him to
asked if
shut
I
me
could
off.
respond. I did not ask him to shut you off, Mrs.
Okay.
Dawson, in any way, shape, or form. I was merely going to respond because in no way did I intend my tone to be anything other than informed and passionate about an issue that I know is important to our school district and families.
Okay, well, you have a real keen way of throwing in this professional opinion thing. And, you know, and you know, you can defend Pat, and so does he. Everything we discuss here always seems to be, you know, brought around this professional opinion stuff. We're all intelligent people here, and we've all been studying it too. I appreciate the input, but I think we need to all just buck up and vote.
Would you accept the notion, though, Ms. Dawson, that by waiting as long as we have done, if the resolution passes, we are in a more advantageous position now than we were several months ago if we should be challenged? Have you could ask the folks at Delaware Valley School District if you don't agree with me. Now, at least we have a decision, we have a decision in the Supreme Court and some documentation from the Justice Department, which is a little more favorable to defending such a resolution. And if that trend continues, it would even get better. So I would not say that we've wasted our time. That's my opinion. And one of the reasons why this is dragged on, because we're watching it drag on nationally. So I think we're better off having this vote later than if we would have had it early in the summer.
Well, I personally think a large reason why it dragged on is because we had members of this board persist in filibustering every kind of movement to get anything accomplished. And so I guess that the board at large accomplished what it meant to do, which is just to filibuster it to death. So I have nothing more to say. So do whatever you, President, do, and I'll just do what I'm told.
Again, I'll say that I understand the administration's, or Dr. Miller, and he speaks for the administration and as a member of the board, I understand the concerns with being so close to having a vote, so close to the first day of school. There's a lot going on, and to throw that in, I think would be a wrench. I also think, as Dr. Miller said, if we did vote on the resolution and adopted it, I think that the administration would do everything to have as smooth a transition as possible on that. My preference would not be to vote at the next meeting. However, if it's brought forward, I will vote. And you could put me down for the same vote that I will vote for until the day the Lord takes the breath from my mouth, which will be, I will vote for my resolution. I will vote for privacy, and nothing else will ever change my opinion of that. So that's where I am. I will vote if somebody else brings it up. It's not my preference to vote on that day, because I think there's a lot more to think about on that day than just this one topic. But I think this is a huge topic, and we owe a vote. Everyone owes a vote to the community.
Anybody else wish to opine on whether or not we should vote on the day before school?
Okay. I do tend to agree with the administration that it is really chaotic the first, the day before school starts, and there is a lot on everyone's plate at that time. However, if there is a vote, I will vote. What I do want to see is a vote. I really, at this point, don't care which way it goes. I do want I just want to say that we voted on something, and this is what we've decided on. I feel that it's been a long time now, and we did promise everyone before school started, and I just want to have our stamp on something. Whatever way it falls, and that's fine. But I do want to just vote, because we just, every week, and, we keep hearing more and more and discussing more and more, and I understand that. And you're right that it was a benefit to us to wait. You're right. And, but nonetheless, I do think that we need to firmly have a decision, whatever
Yes.
that may be. And it's fine if it's in September, or, even not to push it out further, but they're saying the Supreme Court will have whether or not they're going to accept the stay or not by the end of September.
That won't be till October.
Oh, okay.
In October, whether they grant an appeal or not.
And that's the earliest it will be, is October. Ms. Goebel, Mr. Sundo, do you have an opinion?
I did not want to vote tonight because it was not on the agenda, and I don't know if the two board members missing would have called in if it was on the agenda. As far as voting next meeting, I certainly do defer to the administration. However, if I'm called upon to vote, I will vote. I'll be here that meeting and I will vote.
Well, I would just move what Denny just said. I think, I would like to respect the administration, Dr. Miller, and the administration's request to not vote and disrupt the beginning of school. I understand what Teresa's saying. We made a commitment to the community, but on the other hand, we are learning a lot as we wait, and things are becoming clearer. So I'd just like to point that out, that I don't think waiting is hurting any of us. So, I would prefer to support the request of the administration and wait and vote in September, but, if there's a vote put forward, then I guess I'll vote, but I would prefer not to.
Well, then I will do what presidents do. I'm assimilating the opinion of the board, and I have 5 members that wish to defer to administration, and therefore I will. And I will not put this on the agenda until the 12th. But I will request the 12th at the next meeting, when we meet on the 22nd, I will attempt to obtain a commitment from every board member to be present on the 12th, or to call in, so that we can have the vote on that resolution.
Does it make sense to have all 3 back on for discussion next week, prior to that? I'll be honest, I'm sitting here, I don't know how it got lost, or in my mind, I got lost in the nuance between Resolution 2 and the hybrid resolution. Because I agree firmly that pretty much would be in concert, that we're really just talking about the use of bathrooms. But every other deference to a transgender would be obliged. So unless I fell off the boat somewhere, I don't think you disagree on any of that.
Well,
The hybrid was a policy discussion. There's 2 resolutions.
Right.
Yeah, they were different formats, made it hard to match them up. But
the hybrid resolution was something that I brought up for discussion in the Staff Services Committee meeting.
Right.
A policy is something that has to be read 3 times before it becomes immediate, whereas a resolution takes effect immediately. So it's a different philosophical issue. So that, fortunately and unfortunately, that didn't get a whole lot of traction from either poll or the discussion, which I thought was unfortunate, but so we have what we have. So, do we have any further discussion on legal update regarding privacy? Item 10.03, Policy 011, Principles for Governance and Leadership. It's a discussion item, whether or not we wish to further discuss this policy. Anybody have an opinion? Is it supposed to replace policy 04, or?
It was pulled from the batch when this set of policies was approved.
This was a brand-new policy that they pulled some language from.
Yeah.
old.
So it was one that we would opt to adopt or not. Yeah, I'm not interested in it. I'm
Sorry?
not interested in it.
Why?
Because I'm not.
No reason?
Not right now.
What is it?
Okay. Anybody else have an opinion?
I'm fine with it, Jeff.
Anybody else? I guess I would keep it pulled from the batch for the moment until there seems to be more interest. Item 10.04, schedule committee meetings.
Yeah, this was a tentative list, really just trying to line up some of the dates that we have for board meetings with some of the items that we know will be coming forward for discussion. So we shared this initially during the summer retreat. We don't want to be too far ahead in our thoughts in order to leave flexibility, but we felt that some of these dates and topics made sense with where the meetings fell. So if the board is generally comfortable with these, we would go about advertising them as a group. They're all, I would note a couple of things. We only have one November meeting of the regular combined meeting this November. So we did that intentionally a long time ago with the idea that that's when the academic achievement report is finalized. Other than that, these tie into the board meetings.
For the joint meeting on the 22nd, number one, I'm good for that, but do we think that this time it will be a little more focused on the finance component, or?
It will be more focused on finance. So what we're looking at there is we've had a 5-year capital funding plan. We're trying to extend that to 10. In order to do that, one of the pieces that we feel we've been missing was an anticipated lifespan of major systems within our schools, HVAC, roofs, any electrical or flooring or other windows. And so Mr. Zhang has more comprehensively gone through Wexford to use that as a sample and look at all of those systems and identify life cycles, warranties, expected, et cetera. What we'd like to do is really talk about the format of that with the board, using Wexford as the example, fold that into the nuts and bolts of budget, because that concept of capital funding is a big lever in terms of how we look at multi-year budgeting. So it would definitely be more of a financial intent, but the content of the capital funding is buildings and grounds, if that makes sense.
Okay. Because as I'm looking here, and am I right, the next finance meeting is December 12th. From there, and there's no more operational service in between then. So I think we're going to capture a lot of concepts there that we're going to be tying into kind of what
Budget development, that's right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
So I think I'm good with it, Denny. I mean,
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, for that 22nd, I think the financial component's going to kind of jump out, even though we talked finance last time a little bit. What jumped out at you was the study of the athletic field. I think this is going to be maybe more numbers focused, I think.
It'll be, yes, but it'll be more structured. Does the board have sufficient information around future capital funding needs based on what we're pulling together? If so, we'll replicate that across the other 5 schools and the stadium. Okay. If the board has different perspectives on how we want to think about long-lived assets and capital decisions, we need to know that in August, so then over September, October, Mr. Zhang can pull all that in a way that the board is comfortable. Because ultimately, if there's not confidence in that 10-year picture, then that's going to undermine our ability to have budgetary discussions about it. Okay.
Any other comments on this committee meetings? Reports. Dr. Miller, do you have any reports?
The annual report will be coming out soon, and I just want to thank Ms. Hathorn for pulling it all together. But I hope that when it's one of the, maybe the only real touch it, feel it, written publication that we have go out now, since most things are electronic. It's unbelievable. And it tells so many stories of good news about the achievements of students, staff, across all areas of the district, academically, athletically. It is fantastic. So I would just ask, take a look when you get it. It's really fantastic. It should be mailed.
It's hitting the Gibsonia post office and Westford post office this week, so I'm hoping by Wednesday, Thursday.
That's it for me.
Any other reports? Item 11.02, move to our second recognition of visitors. Anybody wish to approach the board? Thank you. The board will retire to executive session to discuss a personal matter. Thank you for attending.